A highly trained former Navy SEAL, who happens to be a black woman, finds herself targeted by a group of racist attackers who mistake her for an easy victim. However, they quickly learn they've made a grave miscalculation when she expertly defends herself using her military training. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Mae Richards pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Diner just after the morning rush. The small-town establishment sat on the corner of Main and Oak, its faded blue awning casting shadows over windows decorated with seasonal paper cutouts. She'd been coming here every Thursday morning for the past 5 years, drawn by their cornbread, and the fact that it was one of the few places in town that still served proper grits. The bell chimed as she pushed open the door. Mae nodded to Sarah, the regular waitress who'd already started pouring her usual coffee. The diner was mostly empty, save for a couple of truckers at the counter and a group of young men occupying the corner booth. Their laughter carried across the room, too loud for the quiet morning atmosphere. "Your usual spot's open, Ms. Richards," Sarah said, gesturing to Mae's preferred booth by the window. The leather seat was cracked but comfortable, offering a clear view of both the street and the diner's entrance, a habit Mae had never quite shaken from her military days. Mae settled into her seat, arranging her purse beside her and smoothing her grey cardigan. She could feel the weight of her phone in her pocket, another security measure she maintained despite being years into retirement. The coffee arrived promptly, black with 1 sugar, just as she liked it. "English muffins fresh out of the toaster," Sarah mentioned, placing the menu down despite knowing Mae wouldn't need it. "Want me to put in your usual?" Before Mae could respond, a sharp whistle cut through the diner. One of the young men from the corner booth was staring directly at them, a smirk playing across his face. His leather jacket bore patches Mae recognized as belonging to a local gang that had been making headlines recently. "Hey, Grandma," he called out, his voice carrying a deliberate edge. "Ain't you in the wrong part of town?" Sarah tensed, her order pad gripped tightly. Mae placed a steady hand on the waitress's arm. "The usual would be fine, Sarah, thank you." The group's attention was fully focused on Mae now. There were 5 of them, all wearing similar jackets, their booth littered with half-empty plates and coffee cups. The apparent leader, a tall man with close-cropped blonde hair, stood up and approached Mae's table. "I asked you a question," he said, placing both hands on the edge of her table and leaning forward. His breath smelled of cigarettes and coffee. "This ain't exactly your kind of establishment anymore, if you know what I mean." Mae took a deliberate sip of her coffee, maintaining eye contact. "Young man, I've been coming to this diner since before you were born. I suggest you return to your table and finish your breakfast." The other men had risen from their booth now, forming a loose semicircle around Mae's table. Sarah had retreated behind the counter, her hand hovering near the phone. The truckers studiously focused on their meals, shoulders hunched. "Or what?" The leader's voice dropped lower, threatening. "You gonna make us?" Mae set her coffee cup down with precise control. "That would be your first mistake, assuming I couldn't." The group laughed, the sound echoing off the diner's windows. One of them, wearing a red bandana, reached for Mae's coffee cup. "Maybe we should help you drink this. Show you some manners." Mae's voice remained steady. "Last warning, step back." Instead, the leader grabbed Mae's arm, yanking her from the booth. "Let's take this outside, teach you about respect." Mae allowed herself to be pulled toward the door, her expression unchanging. Sarah's voice called out, "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," the leader shouted back. "They know better than to interfere." Outside, the morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The gang members formed a circle around Mae, their confidence growing with each step. They didn't notice how she positioned herself, how her feet shifted slightly on the asphalt, or how her hands remained relaxed at her sides rather than raised in fear. "You really should have listened," Mae said quietly, her words nearly lost in the sound of passing traffic. "But I suppose some lessons have to be learned the hard way." The leader lunged forward, reaching for her collar. His mistake was assuming that age had slowed her reflexes, that the grey hair and cardigan meant weakness. He was about to learn just how wrong he was, and Mae Richards, retired Navy SEAL, was about to remind this small town that appearances could be deceiving. The leader's grip never landed on Mae's collar. Instead, his arm met empty air as she stepped aside with practiced efficiency. His momentum carried him forward, leaving him off balance, exactly as she'd anticipated. Mae's movements were precise, economy of motion honed through years of training. Her elbow connected with his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. As he doubled over, she used his own weight against him, redirecting his forward motion into a controlled fall. He hit the asphalt with a dull thud. "What the hell?" One of his companions rushed forward, swinging wildly. May blocked the punch with her forearm, twisted his wrist, and applied pressure to a nerve cluster that sent him to his knees. The third attacker hesitated, suddenly unsure. "Stand down," May commanded, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone used to being obeyed. "This ends now." The leader struggled to his feet, face red with rage and embarrassment. "Get her," he wheezed, pointing at May while still trying to catch his breath. Two gang members approached from different angles, thinking to overwhelm her. May's response was methodical. A sweep took out the first one's legs, while she blocked the second's attack. Her counterstrikes were controlled, designed to disable without causing permanent damage, a skill perfected through countless combat situations. Jesus Christ, she's some kind of ninja. The guy in the red bandana backed away, pulling out his phone to record the scene. May maintained her defensive stance, breathing steady. "I warned you, multiple times. Now we can end this here, or I can demonstrate more of what the Navy SEALs taught me about handling multiple attackers." The leader's eyes widened at the mention of SEALs. He spat blood from his split lip onto the pavement. "You're lying! No way they let—" His words cut off as May executed a perfectly timed joint lock, dropping him to one knee. "They didn't let me do anything. I earned my place just like every other SEAL. Now are we finished?" Around them, a small crowd had gathered. Cell phones recorded from every angle as the elderly woman systematically neutralized each threat. The gang members' bravado crumbled under May's efficient defense. Their coordinated attack dissolved into chaos as she countered each move with military precision. "This is going viral," someone in the crowd muttered, thumbs tapping rapidly on their screen. "Old lady takes down entire gang." The leader finally raised his hands in surrender, his confident swagger replaced by pained movements. "This isn't over," he growled, but the threat sounded hollow. "Actually it is," May replied, "because now everyone knows what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." She gestured to the phones surrounding them. "And I suspect your reputation just took a significant hit." Police sirens wailed in the distance, approaching slowly, too slowly to have been responding to Sarah's call. May noted this detail, filing it away for future reference. The gang members used the moment to retreat, helping their injured companions into a black SUV that peeled out of the parking lot. The leader pointed at May from the passenger window. "You better watch your back, old woman. Nobody embarrasses us like this." May straightened her cardigan, outwardly unruffled. "That sounds suspiciously like a threat. I wouldn't advise making those, especially not with so many witnesses recording." The crowd's phones captured everything: the gang's hasty retreat, their threats, and May's composed response. Within hours, the video would spread across social media platforms, igniting discussions about self-defense, ageism, and racial tensions in small-town America. Sarah emerged from the diner, hands shaking as she approached May. "Are you okay? I'm fine," May assured her, though her muscles reminded her that it had been a while since she'd needed to use her training. "Though I suspect my breakfast is cold by now." "On the house," Sarah insisted, "and probably a few more after this." As the crowd dispersed and the police finally arrived, May caught fragments of conversations around her. People were already taking sides, their whispers revealing the deeper divisions within the community. Some praised her actions while others muttered about her causing trouble and not knowing her place. May knew this incident would have repercussions. The gang wouldn't take this humiliation lightly, and their threats weren't empty. But she hadn't survived multiple combat tours by backing down from bullies, and she wasn't about to start now. A young officer approached, notepad in hand. His expression wavered between respect and uncertainty. "Ma'am, we'll need to take your statement." May nodded, noting how he positioned himself between her and his partner, who seemed less than pleased about interviewing her. The town's fault lines were already showing, and this incident had just driven a wedge into them. "Of course, officer," she said, her voice level, "though I'm curious why it took so long for anyone to respond to a direct threat of violence against a citizen. Perhaps we should discuss that as well." The video of May's confrontation with the gang reached 2 million views by sunset. Local news vans parked outside her modest 2-story home, their satellite dishes stretching up like mechanical trees. May watched them from her living room window, sipping tea and screening her calls. "This is ridiculous," Police Chief Warren declared at the hastily assembled press conference. "What we had was a minor altercation that Ms. Richards chose to escalate. If she had simply called the police, like the waitress did, a reporter interrupted. Records show it took 23 minutes for officers to respond to a priority call involving immediate danger. The chief adjusted his collar. We had other pressing matters across town. The point is, Ms. Richards's military background doesn't give her the right to take the law into her own hands. She could have seriously injured those young men. Social media exploded with competing hashtags. May the Hero and Troublemaker May battled for trending status. The local Facebook groups turned into battlegrounds, with longtime neighbors taking opposing sides. Carol Bennett, who'd lived next door to May for 15 years, appeared on the evening news. Those boys were just having breakfast. May's always been different, keeps to herself. Maybe if she tried fitting in more, these things wouldn't happen. The gang's leader, identified as Jason Burke, released a statement through his father's law firm, claiming he and his friends were victims of an unprovoked attack. We respectfully approached Ms. Richards about disruptive behavior, and she responded with excessive force. May's phone rang again. This time she answered, recognizing her granddaughter's number. "Grandma, I just landed at the regional airport. Don't talk to anyone else until I get there." Jessica Richards' voice carried the sharp authority that had made her one of Atlanta's most respected civil rights attorneys. The footage is clear, but they're already trying to spin this. Classic victim-blaming narrative. They interviewed Carol, May informed her. "Apparently I don't fit in enough." Of course they did. Jessica's disgust carried through the phone. "Find the one black neighbor willing to criticize you on camera. I'm getting in my rental car now." At the local diner, business boomed as people came hoping to see another confrontation. Sarah found herself answering the same questions repeatedly. Yes, she comes here regularly. No, she's never caused trouble before. Yes, those boys were harassing her first. The town council called an emergency meeting. Mayor Phillips tried maintaining order as residents lined up to speak. The divide was stark and immediate. "Those boys have been terrorizing this town for months," Gerald Thompson, owner of the hardware store, declared. "About time someone stood up to them." "She humiliated them publicly," countered Margaret Burke, Jason's aunt and the town treasurer. "What did she expect would happen? This isn't the military." Outside the council meeting, a small group gathered with handmade signs supporting May. Across the street, an equally sized group demanded her arrest for assault. The police maintained a careful distance between them. Jessica arrived at May's house as the evening news ran another segment on the incident. She immediately began laying out files on the dining room table. "The police report is a joke," she announced, highlighting sections. "They've characterized you as the aggressor, despite multiple witness statements and video evidence showing clear self-defense. And look at this. They listed the gang members as local youth group in the initial report." May studied the document. "Notice who signed off on it. Lieutenant Hayes. His son runs with Burke's crew." Jessica's phone buzzed with notifications. "They're organizing a protest outside the police station tomorrow, both sides. This could get ugly fast." She looked up at her grandmother. "The gang's not going to let this go, and they've got friends in high places." "I noticed," May replied, thinking of the delayed police response. "Burke's father represents half the businesses in town. His brother sits on the county board, which is exactly why we need to fight this the right way." Jessica pulled out her laptop. "I'm filing for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. Those threats they made on camera, that's grounds for a restraining order." A brick crashed through the front window, sending glass spraying across the carpet. May moved with practiced speed, pulling Jessica down behind the couch. Outside, engines revved as a car peeled away into the night. "You okay?" May asked, already moving to check the perimeter. Jessica brushed glass from her hair. "They're trying to intimidate us. Classic tactic. They'll have to do better than that." May picked up the brick. Attached was a note. "Go back where you came from." "Really?" Jessica photographed the brick and note. "In 2024, they're still using that line?" May's expression hardened. "They're not very creative, but they are connected. The real question is how deep those connections go." Flashing lights appeared outside as a patrol car finally responded to the broken window. Jessica stood, straightening her jacket. "Let me handle this. We're going to document everything, build our case methodically." "Just like I taught you," May nodded, watching the officers approach. Their body language told her everything she needed to know about whose side they were on. The incident had exposed the town's hidden fractures, bringing long-simmering tensions to the surface. But for May Richards, this was just the beginning. She'd faced worse odds before, in places far more dangerous than this small town. The difference was, this time she was fighting for more than survival. She was fighting for justice. The vandalism escalated systematically over the next week. May's mailbox disappeared overnight. Her car's tires were slashed in the grocery store parking lot. Spray-painted threats appeared on her garage door. "Seal this" and "Watch your six." Messages that proved the gang had researched her military background. May documented everything methodically, habits from her service extending into civilian life. She photographed each incident, noting times and possible witnesses. Most neighbors suddenly became very interested in their phones or gardening whenever she appeared. "They're trying to isolate you," Jessica observed, adding another photo to their growing evidence file. Classic intimidation strategy. May was installing the fourth security camera when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Tonight's the night, old lady. Hope you're ready." "They're not even trying to be subtle anymore," May said, showing Jessica the message. She'd already begun implementing security measures that would have impressed her old SEAL team. Motion sensors covered every approach to the house. Strategic lighting eliminated potential hiding spots. Jessica typed rapidly on her laptop. "That's the third direct threat this week. The police say they can't trace the numbers. Burner phones, convenient." May received another text, this one including a photo of her during her morning walk. "They're watching the house." "Let them watch," Jessica replied, but her hand tightened on her coffee cup. "We've got cameras covering every angle now." At dusk, 3 black SUVs cruised past the house, windows tinted beyond legal limits. May recognized Jason Burke in the lead vehicle, his face illuminated briefly by a streetlight. He wasn't trying to hide anymore. "Call your SEAL contact," Jessica suggested, watching the SUVs make another pass. "What did you say his name was? Rodriguez?" "Already did." May checked the reinforced locks on the doors. "He's got some interesting information about Burke's operation. Apparently, our local gang has connections reaching far beyond this town." The power cut out at 10 p.m., plunging the street into darkness. May's backup generator kicked in immediately, another preparation her neighbors had questioned as excessive. Security lights snapped on, revealing 6 figures approaching the house from different directions. "Right on schedule," May noted, moving to the security monitor she'd installed in the kitchen. "They really should have researched SEAL tactics better. Night operations were my specialty." Jessica already had 911 on the line, but May knew response times would be conveniently slow again. The gang members wore masks now, carrying bats and what looked like pipes. They moved with the confidence of people used to facing no resistance. "You should stay in the panic room," May told her granddaughter, referring to the reinforced interior room she'd prepared. "This could get messy." "Like hell," Jessica replied, setting up her phone to record. "They're not the only ones who can document events." The first rock shattered against the reinforced window, bouncing off harmlessly. May's security upgrades had anticipated this level of attack. The gang members grew bolder, moving closer to the house. Jason Burke's voice carried clearly through the night air. "Come out and face us. No cameras to hide behind now." May's phone buzzed again. Rodriguez confirming he was 20 minutes out with reinforcements. She just had to hold the line until then. "Last chance, Richards," Burke shouted. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." May activated the exterior sprinkler system she'd modified. High-pressure jets of water caught the gang members by surprise, scattering their formation. The security lights strobed in a disorienting pattern she'd programmed specifically for this scenario. "Amateur hour," May muttered, watching them stumble around her yard. Her cameras captured every moment of their confusion. Burke recovered first, signaling his people to regroup. They produced bolt cutters for the chain on the front gate, their intentions clear. But May had anticipated this too. "You really should have done your homework," she called through the security system's speaker. "SEAL teams specialize in defending positions against superior numbers. Would you like to see how?" The sound of approaching motorcycles made Burke hesitate. May's old team was arriving ahead of schedule, the rumble of their bikes carrying clearly through the night. The gang members looked to their leader, their confidence wavering. "This isn't over," Burke shouted, but he was already retreating to his vehicle. "We've got friends you haven't met yet." "So do I," May responded calmly, watching them flee as the first motorcycles appeared at the end of her street. Jessica lowered her phone, having captured the entire encounter. "That's another failure to add to their record, but his last threat concerns me. What did he mean by friends we haven't met?" May watched her old team secure the perimeter, their military training evident in their movements. "That's what worries me. Burke's too confident, too protected. Someone powerful is backing him. Then we'll find out who," Jessica declared, already planning their next move. "They're not just fighting an old lady anymore. They're fighting a SEAL and a lawyer who specializes in exposing corruption. May nodded, but her tactical mind was already gaming out scenarios. Burke's gang had connections, resources, and protection from local authorities. This attack was just a probe, testing her defenses and responses. The real battle was still coming, and it would take more than security cameras and sprinkler systems to win it. May sat in her study after her team left, examining old photographs spread across her desk. Each image captured moments from her 23 years of service, telling a story few would believe. She picked up one from 1989, her BUD/S graduation. Out of a class of 147 candidates, she was one of only 11 to complete the training. "I've never seen these before," Jessica said, picking up a photo of a younger May in combat gear. "You never talk about your service." "Wasn't allowed to, mostly. First woman to complete SEAL training?" The brass kept it quiet, said the country wasn't ready. May sorted through more photos. "They listed me as support staff on paper, but in the field, rank doesn't matter as much as capability." A worn journal lay open beside the photos. May's precise handwriting detailed missions she could now discuss decades later. Somalia, Panama, Iraq, operations that never made the headlines but shaped international events. "Your first deployment," May pointed to an entry, "I was leading a team in Baghdad. Command didn't want me in the field, said it would complicate unit dynamics. My team leader, Rodriguez, the one who came tonight, he stood up for me, said he'd rather have the best operator watching his six than worry about politics." Jessica read through the journal entries. "You faced discrimination from both sides. Some locals wouldn't work with a woman. Some commanders wouldn't trust my judgment. Had to be twice as good, twice as tough, twice as reliable." May closed the journal. "Every mission was a test, not just of skill, but of will." A photo from 1995 showed May receiving a Silver Star, though the ceremony was closed to the press. "That mission went sideways. Lost 2 good men. Extracted a high-value target under heavy fire. Command wanted to give the credit to my XO, said it would look better. He refused, threw his career away standing up for the truth. Like what's happening now," Jessica noted. "They're trying to rewrite events, make you the aggressor." May picked up another photo, her team in Afghanistan, 2002. Same playbook, different players. "Back then, they said I was too aggressive, too confrontational. Really meant I wouldn't stay quiet, wouldn't play their game." The night's events had stirred old memories. May remembered countless nights on watch, defending positions against superior forces. But this fight was different. The enemy wasn't hiding in distant mountains, but walking Main Street in broad daylight. "Your father never understood," May said quietly, touching a family photo from the 1990s. "Couldn't tell him what I really did. He thought I abandoned the family for a desk job. By the time the classified missions were declassified, he'd already made up his mind about me." Jessica squeezed her grandmother's hand. "He's reading about you now. Those articles about tonight, they're everywhere. People are starting to ask questions about your service. Let them ask." May gathered the photos. "I earned every achievement, every scar, every victory. Proved myself in places most people never see, against odds most couldn't imagine." She pulled out one final photo, her last mission briefing in 2010. "That's when I learned the most important lesson. The hardest fights aren't always the ones with guns. Sometimes they're the ones that force you to stand your ground when everyone expects you to retreat." The phone buzzed. Rodriguez sending tactical updates. The gang's connection spread across 3 states, tied to larger criminal enterprises. This wasn't just about local harassment anymore. "They think age has made me weak," May said, checking the security feeds. "But they don't understand. Every discriminatory comment, every blocked promotion, every dismissed achievement, they all taught me something valuable. Patience, persistence, and the importance of choosing the right battlefield." Jessica studied the wall of medals May kept hidden behind her desk. "Why keep all this secret? You could have gone public years ago." "Because the mission always came first. Personal recognition meant nothing compared to getting the job done." May stood, her posture straight despite the late hour. "But now, the mission is here. This town, these people, they need to see that strength comes in many forms." Through the window, May watched another police cruiser drive past, deliberately slow. They were watching, waiting for her to break, to show weakness. They didn't realize they were dealing with someone who had spent decades being underestimated. "Tomorrow," May decided, "we start pushing back, not just against Burke's gang, but against the whole system that protects them. I didn't earn my trident by backing down from bullies, and I'm not about to start now." Jessica spread case files across May's dining room table, creating a web of connections with red string and pushpins. Police reports, property records, bank statements, and court documents painted a picture of systematic corruption. "Look at this," Jessica pointed to a property deed. "Burke's father bought the old mill for pennies on the dollar right before the council approved that development project. The police chief's brother-in-law is the real estate agent." May studied the documents. "The same mill where they caught those kids last year. The charges disappeared. Every case involving Burke's gang gets buried." Jessica pulled up court records on her laptop. Assault charges reduced to misdemeanors. Drug charges dismissed due to mishandled evidence. Even that armed robbery at the gas station, witnesses suddenly changed their stories. A knock at the back door interrupted them. Officer Sarah Chen entered quickly, checking to ensure no one had followed her. "I can't stay long, but you need to see this." She handed Jessica a USB drive. "Internal affairs reports. They're not supposed to leave the building." Jessica plugged in the drive. "Why help us? You're risking your career." "Because I joined the force to protect people." Chen's voice was firm. "What they're doing, it's not law enforcement, it's organized crime with badges." The files revealed a pattern. Officers who questioned Burke's gang found themselves assigned to dead-end shifts. Those who played along received promotions over time, and off-the-books payments labeled as consulting fees. "Chief Warren's signature is on all of these," May noted, examining the payment authorizations. "He's not just looking the other way, he's orchestrating it." Chen nodded. "Warren meets with Burke's father every Sunday after church. Golf games that last hours. They discuss more than their putting strategy." Jessica documented everything, creating backup copies. "This goes beyond local corruption. These payment amounts, they're too large for a small-town protection racket. Burke's gang isn't just running drugs and intimidation," Chen explained. "They're moving something bigger through the old mill. Whatever it is, the FBI's been sniffing around. But getting blocked at every turn," Jessica finished, "because Warren tips them off. That's why they never find anything during raids." May's tactical mind assessed the intelligence. They're using the town as a distribution hub, small enough to avoid attention, corrupt enough to ensure protection, strategically located near 3 state borders. Chen's radio crackled. "Got to go. Be careful with those files. People have disappeared for knowing less." After she left, Jessica continued mapping connections. The mayor's involved too. His offshore accounts show regular deposits matching withdrawal amounts from Burke's shell companies. "Classic money laundering," May observed. But they got sloppy, got too comfortable thinking no one would challenge them. Jessica's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Just got this. Back off or the next story won't be about a brave SEAL. It'll be about a grandmother who had a tragic accident." May's expression hardened. "They're escalating, moving from intimidation to direct threats. We need to move faster." Jessica pulled up property records for the old mill. "There's a council meeting tomorrow about expanding the mill's operations. Burke's father submitted the proposal. Perfect timing." May checked her security feeds. "My team's surveillance confirms unusual activity at the mill. Regular late-night deliveries, armed guards, no paper trail." Jessica started drafting documents. "I can file emergency injunctions, demand federal oversight." "No," May interrupted. "They're expecting legal maneuvers. We need to change tactics, hit them where they're not looking." "What are you thinking?" May pulled out her phone, sending a coded message to Rodriguez. "They're watching the front door while leaving the back gate unguarded. Time to use that against them." "The evidence," Jessica began, "is useless if we can't prove what's happening at that mill." May checked her timeline. "Chen's intel gives us probable cause. Now we need concrete proof of what they're moving through there." Jessica understood. "You're planning an operation. They think they're dealing with an old lady causing trouble." May smiled grimly. "Time to remind them they're dealing with a SEAL who specialized in covert intelligence gathering." The pieces were falling into place. The corruption ran deep, but like all criminal enterprises, it had weak points. May had spent her career identifying and exploiting such vulnerabilities. Burke's gang might control the town's official channels, but they'd never faced an opponent trained in asymmetric warfare. "One condition," Jessica insisted. "Whatever you're planning, I'm part of it." "You need someone who knows the legal angles." May nodded. "Tomorrow night, Rodriguez's team will create a distraction at the council meeting. While everyone's focused there, we find out what they're really protecting at that mill." The operation was taking shape, a classic infiltration mission with modern stakes. May didn't know if she was going to expose corruption or walk into a trap. But after decades of service, she knew one thing for certain. The most dangerous enemies weren't always the ones carrying weapons. Sometimes they were the ones carrying badges and briefcases. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters as Jessica filed the lawsuit. Local news cameras captured every detail: the thick stack of documents, May's steady stride beside her granddaughter, the police presence that seemed more focused on intimidation than protection. "We're filing both civil and criminal complaints," Jessica announced to the gathered press. "The evidence demonstrates a pattern of coordinated harassment, police misconduct, and systematic civil rights violations." Burke's father waited at the top of the steps with his legal team from Mitchell & Green, Atlanta's most expensive law firm. His suit cost more than most local monthly salaries. "Ms. Richards is attempting to paint herself as a victim while terrorizing local youth. We'll be filing countersuit for assault and defamation." Inside the courtroom, Judge Harrison peered over his glasses at the assembled parties. His history of ruling in Burke's favor was well documented in Jessica's files. "Your Honor," Burke's lawyer began, "this lawsuit is nothing more than a publicity stunt by an attention-seeking individual with a history of aggressive behavior." Jessica stood, her preparation evident in every word. "We have documented 47 instances of harassment, 3 direct threats to my client's life, and clear evidence of police negligence in responding to legitimate calls for assistance." "Alleged harassment," Burke's lawyer corrected. "My clients were simply expressing their First Amendment rights to protest Ms. Richards's disruptive presence in their community. By vandalizing her home? By sending death threats?" Jessica projected photographs onto the courtroom screen. "This goes well beyond protected speech." Judge Harrison shifted uncomfortably as Jessica presented Chen's evidence. "The court needs to consider jurisdictional issues." "Already addressed in our filing," Jessica interrupted, highlighting relevant sections. "Additionally, we've submitted a motion for federal oversight, given the pattern of civil rights violations." May watched the legal battle unfold while monitoring her phone. Rodriguez's team was in position at the mill, gathering intelligence for tonight's operation. The lawsuit served multiple purposes, not just seeking justice, but creating a distraction. Burke's father leaned forward, whispering to his legal team. His confident smile had faded as Jessica systematically dismantled their prepared defense. "Furthermore," Jessica continued, "we have evidence suggesting a coordinated effort between local law enforcement and private citizens to violate my client's constitutional rights." The courtroom stirred at this accusation. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked against the bench. "Those are serious allegations, Counselor, with serious evidence to support them." Jessica produced Chen's USB drive, including internal police documents demonstrating deliberate delayed response times and mishandled investigations. Burke's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. Any internal police documents would be privileged and inadmissible unless obtained through proper whistleblower channels," Jessica countered, which these were. The legal fencing continued for hours. Every motion Burke's team made, Jessica had anticipated and prepared for. May recognized the tactics, control the battlefield, anticipate the enemy's moves, maintain tactical superiority. During a recess, Burke's father approached May. "This can still end peacefully. Name your price." "You think everything has a price," May replied. "That's your weakness." "No, believing in principles is yours." He straightened his tie. "Ask yourself, how many people will get hurt before this ends? Your granddaughter's career, Officer Chen's, the old neighborhood?" "Threats wrapped in concern," May observed. "You're not very original." Jessica returned with more documents. "Judge Harrison is compromised but can't show it too obviously. The federal oversight request has him worried." "Good." May checked her watch. The council meeting would start in 4 hours. "Keep them focused here. Make them think this is our only play." "They've filed every possible motion to delay and obstruct," Jessica noted. "Standard tactics when they're hiding something bigger." "They're buying time," May agreed. "Probably cleaning house at the mill right now." "Then they don't know about Chen's photos." Jessica smiled. "The ones showing last night's shipment, the ones time-stamped and GPS tagged." The afternoon session began with more legal maneuvering. Burke's team tried to paint May as a vigilante, someone taking the law into her own hands. Jessica turned it around, presenting May's service record, the parts that weren't classified, showing a lifetime of lawful service to her country. "My client has demonstrated a consistent commitment to law and order," Jessica argued. "The same cannot be said for the defendants." As the sun began to set, Judge Harrison made his expected ruling, delaying any decisive action pending further review. But Jessica had anticipated this too. "We've already filed appeals," she told May as they left the courthouse. "They'll be so busy fighting legal battles, they won't see the real threat coming." May nodded, sending a coded text to Rodriguez. The legal battle had served its purpose, keeping Burke's organization distracted and confident. Now came the real operation, the one that would expose what they were really hiding at the mill. "They think they've won," Jessica observed, as Burke's team celebrated their temporary victory. "Let them think that," May replied. "Overconfidence makes people sloppy, and sloppy people make mistakes." The community center's main hall was packed beyond capacity. May stood at the front, facing a diverse crowd of local residents who'd responded to her impromptu self-defense workshop announcement. The timing wasn't coincidental. Every person here represented one less pair of eyes on the mill tonight. "First principle of self-defense," May addressed the crowd, her voice carrying to the back row. "Awareness. You need to know what's happening in your community to protect it." Sarah from the diner sat in the front row, notebook ready. Behind her, other small business owners who'd suffered under Burke's protection racket listened intently. They'd been afraid to speak up individually, but together they formed a different kind of force. "The techniques I'm going to show you aren't about fighting," May continued. "They're about surviving, about standing your ground when someone tries to intimidate you." She demonstrated basic moves explaining each one's purpose. This isn't just about physical defense. It's about mental preparation, about knowing your rights and being ready to exercise them. Rodriguez's team members, dressed as regular citizens, spread through the crowd. They'd strategically positioned themselves to monitor entrances and exits while maintaining their cover as interested community members. "Burke's people are watching," Jessica texted from outside. "2 vehicles, just like we planned." May moved through basic security procedures. Your home is your fortress, but you need to make it an unattractive target. Lights, cameras, community watch networks, these aren't signs of paranoia. They're tools of preparation. Local reporter Michael Chen, Officer Chen's brother, live-streamed the workshop. Every minute of coverage kept attention focused here instead of the mill. The hashtag #StandWithMay trended locally, drawing more eyes to the community center. "Questions?" May asked, knowing what would come next. A woman stood up. "What about when the police don't come? When they say they're too busy?" "Document everything," May answered. "Timestamps, video evidence. Build networks with your neighbors. Legal protection starts with good documentation." Another hand raised. "Burke's people threatened my business. Said accidents happen if we don't pay for protection." "Strength in numbers," May responded. "Individual targets are vulnerable. Connected communities are resilient. Share information. Support each other. Make it too costly for them to target any single person." The questions continued, each one revealing another thread of Burke's influence over the town. May wove the responses into a larger lesson about community resilience and organized resistance. "Your next workshop's in 10 minutes, Jessica texted. "Local news is covering it live." May had scheduled 3 consecutive sessions, each designed to draw different segments of the community. The strategy was working. Burke's surveillance teams remained focused on the center, watching for signs of trouble. "Remember," May addressed the first group as they prepared to leave, "what you learned here isn't just about physical safety. It's about standing together, about refusing to be silenced by fear." The second session brought in younger residents, including teens who'd been pressured to join Burke's gang. May adjusted her approach, emphasizing choices and consequences. "There's always another path," she told them, knowing some would report back to Burke. Strength isn't about intimidation, it's about integrity. Outside, protesters gathered, some supporting May, others demanding she leave town. The police maintained a visible presence exactly as planned. Every officer watching the community center was one less watching the mill. "Third group's largest yet," Jessica reported. "Burke's people are getting nervous, trying to photograph everyone who enters." "Let them," May replied. "Every minute they spend here is part of the plan." The evening built toward May's final address to all 3 groups combined. News cameras rolled as she took the stage one last time. "Tonight you came here seeking protection," she began. "But you're leaving with something more valuable, connection. The people sitting next to you aren't just neighbors anymore. They're allies." Rodriguez signaled from the back. Their teams were in position at the mill. Everything was on schedule. "Change doesn't happen in isolation," May continued, keeping all eyes on her. "It happens when communities decide enough is enough, when people stand together and say no more." As she spoke, Jessica coordinated with their allies across town. Chen's evidence was secure, the legal paperwork was in place, everything was ready for what would happen next at the mill. This isn't just about self-defense, May concluded. It's about self-determination, about taking back our community from those who rule through fear. The applause was genuine, the energy in the room electric, but May knew this was just the beginning. The real operation was about to begin, and these people, their courage, their unity, had helped make it possible. As the crowd dispersed, May checked her phone one last time. Rodriguez's message was brief. Green light. The community had served its purpose, providing the perfect cover for what would happen next. Burke's organization was about to learn a harsh lesson about the difference between watching what's in front of them and seeing what's really happening. Burke paced his office at the mill, phone pressed to his ear. The community center's parking lot camera feed showed the last participants leaving May's workshop. She's playing us. All this public attention, these workshops, she's up to something. His father's voice crackled through the speaker. Then find out what. We've got too much product moving through tonight to risk complications. Outside the mill, security patrols doubled their rounds. Burke had pulled in every available member, leaving them short-handed at their usual collection points across town. Fear made him sloppy, exactly as May had predicted. Movement at the south gate, a guard reported over the radio. Probably just deer again. Burke grabbed his jacket. Check it anyway. Check everything. That old lady's smarter than she looks. His phone buzzed with updates from the surveillance team at May's house. She'd just arrived home, Jessica's car in the driveway. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Sir? One of his lieutenants entered without knocking. We've got a problem. Chen's missing. What do you mean missing? Burke's voice rose. Find her. Now. We've been trying. She never logged out of her shift. Car's still at the station. But she's gone. Burke slammed his fist into the desk. The carefully constructed system his father had built was showing cracks. First May's lawsuit, then the community turning against them, and now Chen's disappearance. Get a team to Richard's house, he ordered. I don't care about warrants. Bring her in. 3 black SUVs rolled through town running red lights. Burke's men were no longer trying to be subtle. They needed to regain control, to show the community what happened to those who challenged them. May's house appeared dark when they arrived. The team approached cautiously, remembering their last embarrassment. No water sprinklers this time. No security lights. Just silence. Breach it, Burke commanded over the radio. His men smashed through the front door, weapons ready. The house was empty. Check everywhere, Burke ordered, but he already knew. They'd been played. His phone rang. The mill's security chief. Sir, we're picking up movement in the woods behind the loading dock. Multiple signatures. That's impossible, Burke snapped. We've got everyone watching the realization hit him. The workshops, the lawsuit, the public attention, all of it designed to draw their focus, to make them react exactly as they had. Lock down the mill, he shouted into his phone. Now! But the security chief's next words confirmed his worst fears. Sir, the cameras just went dark. All of them. Burke's hands shook as he dialed his father. No answer. He tried the police chief next, straight to voicemail. The network they'd relied on for protection was suddenly unreachable. Get back to the mill, he ordered his team. The SUVs peeled away from May's empty house, leaving tire marks on the pavement. They were halfway there when emergency vehicles screamed past in the opposite direction, lights flashing but sirens silent. Burke recognized the federal tags. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Should have done your homework on SEAL tactics. Faster, he screamed at his driver. But he knew they were already too late. May hadn't been their target tonight. They'd been hers. The mill came into view, its perimeter lights casting long shadows. Burke could make out figures moving with military precision through the complex. Not local police. Their movements were too coordinated, too professional. His father finally called back. They knew. Somehow they knew about tonight's shipment. The line went dead. Burke's SUV screeched to a halt outside the mill's main gate. May stood waiting, Chen beside her, both illuminated by the emergency lights. Behind them, federal agents swarmed the complex. Looking for something? May asked calmly. Or someone? Burke reached for his weapon, desperation overriding judgment. Chen already had her badge out, federal credentials gleaming. I wouldn't, she advised. The sound of helicopters filled the air as Burke's empire crumbled around him. Years of corruption and intimidation, undone by an elderly woman who'd seen through their defenses and exploited every weakness. You don't understand, Burke tried one last time. We own this town. No, May corrected him. You just made the mistake of thinking you did. Federal agents approached with handcuffs as Burke finally realized the truth. They hadn't been dealing with just an old lady causing trouble. They'd been up against someone who'd spent her life taking down bigger, better organized opponents than their small-town operation, and they'd never stood a chance. Federal agents swarmed the mill complex, while May's former SEAL teammates secured the perimeter. Rodriguez coordinated with the tactical teams, his experience evident in every crisp command. The operation had gone exactly as planned, a testament to months of careful preparation. 7 shipping containers, Chen reported, checking her tablet, all filled with contraband, records going back 3 years. Burke's operation was bigger than we thought. May watched as more vehicles arrived, not just federal agents, but her old team members from multiple operations. John Martinez, now a DEA supervisor, Sarah Cooper, FBI tactical specialist, Mike O'Brien, head of a multi-state task force. Each had come when she called, bringing resources and authority Burke's organization never saw coming. Your intelligence was solid, Martinez told May, reviewing the seizure logs. They were moving everything through here, drugs, weapons, laundered cash, using the legitimate shipping business as cover. Cooper coordinated with the evidence teams, found their records too, names, dates, corrupt officials. Burke's father kept detailed books, typical white-collar arrogance. Burke sat in the back of a federal transport vehicle, watching his empire collapse. His father was already en route to a federal holding facility, along with the police chief and several council members. "You want to know how we did it?" May asked him through the vehicle's open window. "How we got past all your security?" Burke just stared, his confidence finally shattered. "We didn't have to break in," she explained. "Chen had official access. Every time your people were watching me at those community workshops, she was here gathering evidence. Basic misdirection. While you focused on the obvious threat, you missed the real one." Rodriguez approached with a senior federal agent. "May, they want your statement for the record. Your teams too. Officially this time." The night air filled with conversation as May's former teammates shared stories about their operations together. Each one revealed another layer of her service history, painting a picture that left local law enforcement officers listening in astonishment. "Kuwait, 91, Martinez recalled. "May extracted our entire team under heavy fire after our primary exfil went bad. Never even filed for recognition. Said the mission was enough." O'Brien added his own story. "Somalia, 93. She spotted the ambush before anyone else, saved 30 lives that day. Report got buried because they didn't want to admit a woman was running the op." Chen recorded everything, building the official narrative that would explain how a small-town criminal enterprise got dismantled by a coalition of federal agencies. The true story of how an elderly woman used her military training to expose corruption would remain mostly classified. "Your grandson would be proud," Cooper told May quietly, referring to a mission they'd shared years ago. "He followed in your footsteps, you know, leading his own team now." Local news crews arrived, held back by the police perimeter. Their cameras captured the scale of the operation, dozens of federal agents, evidence teams cataloging seized materials, arrested officials being led away in handcuffs. Jessica coordinated with federal prosecutors, ensuring every detail was properly documented. "They're already offering deals," she reported. "Everyone's trying to save themselves." May's teammates had positioned themselves strategically around the complex, their military training evident in their movements. They weren't just providing security, they were sending a message to any of Burke's remaining allies who might consider retaliation. "Still maintain operational excellence," Rodriguez observed, watching them work, "just like you taught us." "Speaking of excellence," Martinez called out, emerging from the mill's office, "found their real books. Offshore accounts, shell companies, political payoffs. Their whole network laid out in neat spreadsheets." Burke's father had made the classic mistake of arrogant criminals, documenting everything. His meticulous records would help dismantle similar operations across 3 states. As the night progressed, more of May's former teammates arrived. Each brought specialized skills and official authority, transforming a local raid into a major federal operation. Their presence sent ripples through the law enforcement community. These weren't just retired SEALs, but highly placed federal officials who'd come personally when May called. "You built quite a network," Chen remarked, watching the teams work together seamlessly. "No," May corrected her. "We built it together. Every mission, every operation, it was always about the team. Tonight just proved that some teams last forever, The first light of dawn revealed the full scope of what they'd accomplished. Burke's operation hadn't just been stopped, it had been completely dismantled, its political protections stripped away, its criminal network exposed, and at the center of it all stood May, surrounded by the allies she'd earned through decades of service. They hadn't come just because she called, they'd come because she'd proven time and again that she could be counted on when it mattered most. "What happens now?" Chen asked as they watched the evidence trucks being loaded. May smiled. "Now? Now we finish what we started, because exposing corruption isn't enough. You have to build something better in its place." The morning after the raid, May's son David arrived unannounced. He stood awkwardly on her porch, duffel bag in hand, looking more like his military file photo than the angry young man who'd walked away 15 years ago. "Saw you on the news," he said when May opened the door. "Figured it was time we talked." Jessica looked up from her laptop as they entered, tension visible in her shoulders. She hadn't seen her father since he'd criticized her choice to take on civil rights cases instead of joining a corporate firm. "The prodigal returns," Jessica said, her tone carefully neutral, "after the dangers passed." "That's not fair," David replied, setting his bag down. "I came as soon as I heard." "The story's been running for weeks," Jessica countered. "Grandmother's been dealing with threats while you've been—" "Where exactly? Still running that security firm in Atlanta?" May moved to the kitchen, starting coffee. Her tactical mind noted how David positioned himself, back to the wall, clear view of exits. Some habits never changed. "I couldn't come earlier," David explained. "Had obligations, contracts." "Obligations?" Jessica's laugh was sharp. "Grandmother had death threats. The police were actively working against her. But you had contracts." May set 3 coffee cups on the table. "Both of you sit down." They obeyed instinctively. The command voice still worked. May studied her son's face, noting new lines around his eyes, grey at his temples. He looked tired, worn down by more than just travel. "Why now?" she asked directly. David stared into his coffee. "My team's been monitoring the situation. When we saw federal movements last night, we knew something big was happening. I should have been here sooner." "Yes," May agreed. "You should have. I didn't understand," he continued. "All those years growing up, you were gone so much. Said you were doing administrative work, support roles. Then I find out from CNN that my mother was some kind of secret SEAL operative," Jessica interrupted. "You didn't find out from CNN. You found out because grandmother finally had clearance to tell the truth, and you weren't around to hear it." "That's enough." May's voice was firm. "Jessica, your father's here now. David, your daughter's right. You should have come sooner. But recriminations don't help us move forward." David pulled out his phone, showing them his company's surveillance reports. "We've been watching Burke's organization for months. Had a federal contract to track their weapons shipments. When I saw Mom's name in the reports—" "You still stayed away," Jessica finished. "Because I didn't know how to face her," David admitted. "All these years I accused her of abandoning us for a desk job, but she was out there fighting battles we never knew about. How do you apologize for that kind of misunderstanding?" May reached for the box of photos she'd shown Jessica earlier. "Start by looking at these. Then we can talk about understanding." David's hands shook slightly as he opened files marked classified that documented his mother's real career. Mission reports, commendations, after-action reviews, the truth about where she'd been during all those absent years. "That mission in '89, he said quietly, "when you missed my graduation. You weren't stuck at a Pentagon desk meeting." "No," May confirmed. "I was extracting a team under fire in Panama. Couldn't tell you then. Couldn't explain why the work was so important." "And Dad? Did he ever know?" "Your father knew what he could handle knowing," May replied. "He chose to believe I prioritized career over family. It was easier than accepting the truth, that I was fighting battles he couldn't imagine to keep that family safe." Jessica watched her father process decades of revised history. "This is why I became a civil rights lawyer," she said. "Grandmother taught me that sometimes the most important fights are the ones most people never see." David nodded slowly. "The work you're doing here against Burke's organization, it's not just about local corruption, is it?" "No," May confirmed. "It's about systems of power that depend on people looking the other way. Just like my missions overseas, the real challenge isn't the direct confrontation. It's exposing the networks that enable corruption to thrive." "I want to help," David said finally. "My company has resources, connections." "First," May interrupted, "you need to rebuild connections here, with your daughter, with your family. The rest can come later." Jessica's expression softened slightly. "We're coordinating with federal agencies to protect witnesses from Burke's network. Could use someone with security experience." David met his daughter's eyes. "I'm not leaving this time. Whatever happens next, I'm staying." "Good," May said, standing to refill their coffee cups. "Because this isn't over. Burke's organization was part of something bigger. We've exposed one layer, but there's more work to do. Then we do it as a family," David decided. "No more missing the important battles." May watched her son and granddaughter begin to bridge the years of distance between them. Some wounds needed time to heal, but at least now they were facing the same direction, united by understanding of what really mattered. "Together," she agreed. "Because the strongest teams are built on trust, and it's time we rebuilt ours." Lieutenant Marcus Wells had been the perfect ally. Too perfect, May realized now. He'd always arrived first at incident scenes, always had the right information, always seemed eager to help. She should have recognized the pattern sooner. The evidence sat on her dining room table. Phone records Chen had recovered, showing regular calls between Wells and Burke's organization. Bank statements revealing deposits that no police lieutenant could explain legitimately. "He played us," Jessica said, reviewing the files. "All those times he offered to help with the investigation. He was monitoring our progress," May finished, feeding information back to Burke. David examined the surveillance photos his security team had compiled. "Look at his patrol patterns, always circling key locations right before Burke's shipments moved through." May's tactical training clicked into place. He wasn't just informing, he was coordinating, using his position to ensure clear routes for their operations. Chen arrived through the back door, face grim. "It's worse than we thought. Wells isn't just corrupt. He's their operations manager. He's been coordinating their entire distribution network across 3 states." The revelation explained too much. How Burke's organization had evaded detection for so long, how they'd known exactly when to move shipments, why certain investigations mysteriously fell apart. "We need to move carefully," May cautioned. "Wells has access to everything, patrol schedules, security protocols, witness locations." "He's already moving," Chen reported, checking her phone. "Just ordered additional patrols around the safe houses where we're keeping Burke's associates who agreed to testify." Jessica grabbed her laptop. "I'll start emergency relocation procedures." "No," May interrupted. "That's what he expects. We need to think like him. What's his real play?" David studied the patrol assignments. "These deployment patterns, he's not protecting the witnesses. He's isolating them, creating gaps in coverage." May nodded. "Classic tactical deception. Make it look like you're reinforcing security while actually exposing vulnerabilities." "We can't warn the other officers without tipping him off," Chen said. "He's monitoring all official channels." "Then we don't use official channels." May pulled out her secure phone. "Rodriguez's team is still in position, and Wells doesn't know about our surveillance on his surveillance." The plan came together quickly. While Wells thought he was orchestrating witness intimidation, May's team would be tracking his every move. The traitor would expose himself trying to spring his trap. "Got him," David announced, monitoring Wells's police radio. "He's requesting backup for a supposed disturbance near the main witness safehouse. Standard procedure would pull units from the secondary locations." "Creating his window of opportunity," May observed. "How long until he moves?" "Based on previous patterns, he'll wait 40 minutes, Chen calculated. Let the redeployed units get properly distracted." May checked her watch. "Rodriguez's team can be in position in 20. Jessica, how fast can you get a federal warrant?" "Already submitted. Judge owes me a favor, one Burke couldn't buy." The pieces were in place. Wells thought he was playing a sophisticated game of misdirection, but he'd never faced opponents trained in counterintelligence. "Movement at the secondary safehouse," David reported. "Wells just arrived ahead of schedule." He's spooked, May realized. Something made him change his timeline. Channel chatter confirmed her suspicion. Wells was accelerating his plan, taking risks. He'd spotted something that made him desperate. "Federal warrant came through," Jessica announced. "Full surveillance authorization and arrest powers." May's phone buzzed, Rodriguez confirming his team was in position. They had Wells surrounded before he knew he was compromised. "Target is approaching witness quarters," David narrated from the surveillance feed. "He's drawn his weapon." "Take him," May commanded. The operation unfolded with precise coordination. Wells never saw Rodriguez's team until they had him in custody. His backup, Burke's men disguised as officers, walked straight into Chen's carefully laid trap. "Found his go bag in the car," Rodriguez reported. "Fake passports, offshore account numbers, detailed intel on witness locations. He was planning to eliminate witnesses and disappear. Wells sat handcuffed in the federal transport vehicle, his police uniform a final mockery of the oath he'd betrayed. "You don't understand," he tried explaining to May. "Burke's organization is bigger than you know. They've got people everywhere." "No," May corrected him. "You never understood. Every move you made, every call you monitored, every patrol you arranged, it all helped us map their entire network. You weren't their inside man in our operation. You were our unwitting asset in theirs." The evidence Wells had accumulated, thinking he was protecting Burke's organization, actually documented their entire criminal enterprise. His meticulous records would help dismantle corruption networks across multiple jurisdictions. "The perfect double agent," Chen observed. "Too bad he didn't know he was playing the role." May watched as Wells was driven away to federal custody. His betrayal stung, but it had served a greater purpose. Sometimes the most effective tools in exposing corruption were the corrupt themselves, their own paranoia and greed leaving behind evidence that would prove their undoing. "One last loose end tied up," Jessica said, reviewing the arrest reports. "No," May corrected her. "One last piece of the puzzle in place. Now we can see the whole picture, and so can federal prosecutors." Wells's betrayal had revealed more than just corruption in the police department. His records exposed the true scope of Burke's operation and the higher-level players they'd need to target next. The war wasn't over, but they'd just won a crucial battle, turning an enemy's weapon against the very network he'd tried to protect. May watched Burke's father pace inside the federal interrogation room. 3 hours of questioning had cracked his corporate veneer, revealing the desperation beneath his expensive suit, but he wasn't breaking. Not yet. "He knows it's over," Rodriguez observed from the monitoring station, "but he's still protecting someone." "Not someone," May corrected. "Something. Look at his body language when they mention the offshore accounts. He's more worried about those records than his own freedom." Wells's seized files had revealed a pattern. Burke's organization wasn't just a local crime ring. It was a distribution hub for a multinational operation. The mill served as a waypoint in a much larger network. "Incoming," David announced, monitoring communications. 3 SUVs just ran the outer checkpoint. Burke's loose. Jason Burke had escaped federal custody during transport, aided by remnants of his organization. Now he was making a desperate play to recover something from the mill before federal agents finished their search. "He'll head for the secure room," Chen predicted. "The one behind the false wall." Wells's files showed weekly deliveries to that location. May's team moved into position. Rodriguez's operators covered the perimeter, while David's security personnel coordinated with federal agents. Years of training merged into seamless cooperation. "Target vehicles approaching south entrance," Jessica reported from the command center. "They're not slowing down." The SUVs crashed through the gate, Burke's men firing at security positions. They weren't trying to be subtle anymore. This was a smash-and-grab operation driven by desperation. "Let them reach the building," May ordered. "They'll lead us to what they're really after." Burke and his remaining loyalists breached the mill's side entrance, moving with practiced efficiency toward the hidden room. They knew federal agents would arrive in force within minutes. Whatever they were after had to be worth the risk. "In position," Rodriguez confirmed. His team had sealed all escape routes while appearing to leave one open, channeling Burke exactly where May wanted him. Burke's father watched the security feeds, his composure finally breaking. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he told the federal agents. "Some doors should stay closed." Inside the mill, Burke's team reached the hidden room. They disabled the security cameras, not realizing May's people had already installed backups. Every move was recorded as Burke attacked the reinforced door with plasma cutters. 5 minutes until full federal response, Chen updated. "Whatever they're after, they're running out of time." The door fell and Burke rushed inside. His reaction was immediate and visible even on thermal imaging. Shock, followed by rage. The room was empty. "Looking for these." May's voice carried through the mill's speaker system. She held up a hard drive and stack of ledgers. "We found them during the first raid. The real records, not the decoys you left for the feds." Burke spun, firing wildly at the speakers. His men clustered around him, suddenly aware they were trapped. "Your father's been protecting you all these years," May continued. "But he wasn't your organization's real insurance policy, was he? It was these records. Proof of who really controls the operation." "You don't know anything," Burke shouted, but the edge of fear in his voice confirmed May's suspicions. "International shipping manifests, shell company structures, offshore account transfers, and names, so many names. Politicians, judges, corporate executives, your entire shadow network. documented in meticulous detail. Burke's men were already surrendering, dropping weapons as federal agents swarmed the building. They could recognize a lost cause, but Burke himself remained dangerous, a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. "You think this ends with me?" he screamed, moving deeper into the mill. "You have no idea what's coming." "Actually, we do," May replied calmly. "Your father just finished telling federal prosecutors everything. Seems he finally realized you weren't worth protecting anymore." The revelation hit Burke hard. He staggered, his weapon dropping slightly, just enough for Rodriguez's team to take him down. The last pieces of his empire crumbled as federal agents secured the scene. In the interrogation room, Burke's father signed his confession. The documents May had recovered would dismantle not just their local operation, but criminal enterprises across multiple countries, decades of corruption exposed by one overconfident family's obsession with record-keeping. "It was never about the mill," May explained to her team afterward. "That was just their distribution point. The real power was in the information, blackmail material, on everyone they'd ever worked with or bought off." "And now?" Jessica asked, watching federal agents load boxes of evidence. "Now we prove that no one's above the law," May replied. "Not corrupt police, not wealthy criminals, not politically connected crime families. The truth has a way of surviving, if you know where to look for it." The sun set on the mill for the last time as Burke's operation. Tomorrow it would be federal property, its secrets exposed, its hidden networks revealed. The final confrontation hadn't come down to gunfire or physical combat, but to the power of documented truth against organized corruption. And May Richards, the elderly woman they'd mistaken for an easy target, had proved once again that the most dangerous weapon against corruption was the courage to stand against it. The federal courthouse buzzed with activity as prosecutors presented their case. May sat in the front row watching Burke and his father face the consequences of their actions. The evidence was overwhelming. 3 decades of criminal enterprise documented in their own meticulous records. "The United States presents evidence item 47B, the prosecutor announced, displaying Wells's seized files. Detailed records of bribes paid to law enforcement officials across 3 states, authorized by the defendants. Burke's expensive legal team had crumbled under the weight of evidence. Their initial bravado disappeared as federal prosecutors methodically exposed the full scope of the criminal enterprise. Each document, each transaction, each corrupt deal painted a picture of systematic corruption. "We're looking at multiple life sentences," Jessica whispered to May. "The RICO charges alone would be enough, but the evidence of witness tampering and attempted murder pushes it beyond any plea deal." Police Chief Warren took the stand, his testimony part of a deal to avoid a life sentence. His confession implicated dozens of officials who'd protected Burke's operation. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined, reaching into state legislatures and federal agencies. "It wasn't just local law enforcement," Warren admitted. "We had judges scheduling vacation during critical cases, customs officials looking the other way, politicians burying investigations. The whole system was compromised." Burke sat stone-faced as his empire collapsed around him. His father, however, aged visibly as each piece of evidence exposed another layer of their operation. The carefully constructed facade of legitimate business dissolved under federal scrutiny. "Document these moves to offshore accounts," the prosecutor highlighted. "Mr. Burke, can you explain why your legitimate shipping business needed shell companies in 7 different countries?" May watched the proceedings with tactical precision, noting which revelations caused reactions among the spectators. Several observers left hurriedly when certain names were mentioned, no doubt carrying warnings to others implicated in the conspiracy. "Federal task forces have already moved on 3 similar operations in other states," Rodriguez reported during a recess. "Your evidence exposed a national network. They're falling like dominoes." The police department underwent a complete overhaul. Chen, promoted to interim chief, led efforts to rebuild public trust. Officers who'd participated in the corruption faced federal charges, while those who'd stayed clean received commendations for their integrity. "We're implementing new oversight procedures," Chen explained to the press. "Independent review boards, community participation, transparent complaint processes. The department will earn back the community's trust through actions, not words." Burke's father finally broke on the 3rd day of testimony. Faced with irrefutable evidence and the prospect of dying in prison, he revealed everything. Names, dates, locations. the full structure of their criminal network laid bare before the court. The mill was just the beginning, he testified. We had similar operations in 12 states, all connected through legitimate-looking businesses. Politicians owned shares through proxies, judges received consulting fees, federal agents got kickbacks for intelligence. Jessica's law firm coordinated with prosecutors to ensure every lead was followed, every connection investigated. The case expanded beyond criminal charges into civil forfeitures, seizing assets bought with illegal profits. Total seizures have passed $500 million, an FBI agent reported. Properties, businesses, bank accounts, everything they built with dirty money is being liquidated. The mayor resigned in disgrace after evidence showed his involvement. The town council dissolved, replaced by interim administrators, until special elections could be held. Decades of corrupt governance ended in a matter of weeks. The defendants have been found guilty on all counts, the judge announced finally. Given the severity and scope of these crimes, I am imposing the maximum sentence allowed by law. Burke and his father stood as their sentences were read, multiple life terms without possibility of parole. Their lawyers immediately announced appeals, but the evidence was too solid, too well documented to offer any real hope. There's something poetic about it, Jessica observed afterward. They kept such careful records to protect themselves, and those same records brought them down. May watched as federal marshals led the Burkes away. They made the classic mistake of believing their power made them untouchable. Forgot that justice doesn't care about money or connections when the truth comes out. The courthouse steps filled with reporters as victims of Burke's operation came forward to tell their stories. Years of intimidation, extortion, and violence exposed to public view. Each testimony reinforced the importance of standing against corruption. What happens now? Chen asked May as they left the courthouse. Now we make sure it doesn't happen again, May replied. Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about building systems that prevent corruption from taking root in the first place. The sun set on a changed town. Burke's organization was finished, its leaders imprisoned, its networks exposed. But May knew the real work was just beginning. Justice served wasn't the end of the story. It was the foundation for building something better. The community center bustled with activity as residents gathered for the first town hall meeting since Burke's conviction. The atmosphere was different now. People who'd once avoided eye contact spoke openly, sharing stories of how the corruption had affected their lives. Today we begin rebuilding, Chen announced from the podium. Not just our institutions, but our connections to each other. May Richards showed us that one person standing up can inspire others to do the same. May sat quietly in the back, observing the changes in her community. Business owners who'd paid protection money now discussed forming a merchants' association. Former rivals collaborated on neighborhood watch programs. The barriers of fear that had divided the town were crumbling. We're establishing a community oversight board, Chen continued. Representatives from every neighborhood working directly with law enforcement to ensure transparency and accountability. Jessica's law firm had set up a free legal clinic, helping residents understand their rights and report past abuses. The lines stretched around the block as people finally felt safe seeking justice. It's not just about legal assistance, Jessica explained to a local reporter. It's about empowering people with knowledge. When communities understand their rights, corruption has nowhere to hide. The old mill, seized by federal authorities, underwent transformation. Community leaders proposed converting it into a job training center, turning a symbol of corruption into a beacon of opportunity. The property seizures created a fund for community development, David reported, reviewing the proposals. Federal guidelines require it be used for public benefit. We can literally rebuild using the resources they used to control us. May's self-defense workshops evolved into community leadership training. She taught more than just physical techniques. Her classes covered civic engagement, community organizing, and the importance of vigilance against corruption. Defense isn't just about protecting yourself, she told her students. It's about protecting each other, building networks strong enough to resist intimidation and corruption. The local diner where everything started became a symbol of change. Sarah, now its owner thanks to federal restitution funds, hosted weekly community meetings. The corner booth where Burke's gang once sat now held a rotating group of community advocates planning improvement projects. We're not just serving food anymore, Sarah explained. We're serving as a gathering place where people can speak freely, share concerns, and work together for solutions. Chen's reformed police department implemented new training programs focusing on community relations and ethical decision-making. Officers who'd stayed clean during Burke's reign helped design protocols to prevent future corruption. Every officer now wears a body camera, Chen announced. All complaints are investigated by an independent review board. Trust has to be earned through consistent transparency. The town's recovery attracted national attention. Journalists came to study how a community corrupted for decades could transform itself so quickly. May found herself increasingly asked to speak about community resilience and grassroots reform. The key is connection, she explained in one interview. Corruption thrives when people feel isolated, powerless, but connected communities where people look out for each other. That's harder to corrupt. Local schools introduced civic education programs, teaching students about the importance of community engagement and ethical leadership. May often visited classrooms, sharing age-appropriate lessons from her experiences. "You're never too young to stand up for what's right," she told a group of middle schoolers, "and you're never too old to start making things better." The healing process wasn't always smooth. Old habits of suspicion died hard. Some resistant to change complained about too much oversight, too much community involvement. But the majority recognized that transparency and engagement were their best defenses against future corruption. "We're seeing similar reforms in other communities," Jessica reported during a town meeting. "Our example is inspiring changes across the state. People realize they don't have to accept corruption as inevitable." May watched it all from her usual spot in the diner, noting how former adversaries now worked together on community projects. The town's transformation proved what she'd always believed, that communities could heal themselves if given the chance and the tools. "It's not perfect," Chen admitted during their weekly check-in. "We still have challenges, still face resistance to change." "Perfect isn't the goal," May replied. "Building something better is, and that happens one connection, one reform, one day at a time." The town would never return to what it was before Burke's organization, but that was the point. It was becoming something stronger, more resilient, more united. The healing process had revealed not just the community's wounds, but its underlying strength. The National Civil Rights Center's annual awards ceremony was a far cry from May's usual environment. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant light over tables, filled with politicians, activists, and community leaders. She sat at the main table, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding its necessity. "Tonight's Lifetime Achievement Award goes to May Richards," the presenter announced, "not just for her decorated military service, recently declassified, but for showing us that the fight for justice knows no age or limits." May approached the podium amid standing applause. She'd worn her dress uniform, medals reflecting the light. The audience included faces she recognized from news coverage of similar battles against corruption across the country. "This recognition isn't about me," she began. "It's about every person who stands up when others look away, every community that chooses unity over fear, every officer who honors their oath despite pressure to compromise." From her seat, Jessica watched her grandmother with pride. The law firm she'd established had expanded, taking on similar cases in other communities. May's example had inspired a network of legal advocates specializing in exposing systematic corruption. "The mayor extends his deepest apologies," the city council chairman announced in a formal ceremony back home. "Your service to this community, both past and present, deserves our highest recognition." May accepted the key to the city with characteristic grace. "Save the apologies," she told them. "Show your sincerity through continued reform and transparency." Documentary crews followed May through her daily routines, capturing how an elderly woman's stand against corruption had sparked a national conversation. They filmed her teaching at the community center, meeting with local leaders, and continuing her work despite the increased attention. "Most people see corruption as too big to fight," May explained to the cameras, "but it's like any other opponent. You study its weaknesses, build your strength, and never fight alone." The federal task force investigating similar operations across the country regularly consulted May. Her tactical experience combined with recent success made her insights valuable for other communities facing systemic corruption. "Richards's case study is now part of FBI training," Chen reported during a community meeting. "They're using our experience to help other departments recognize and resist corruption." Rodriguez's team had incorporated lessons from the Burke operation into their federal security protocols. May proved that corruption doesn't just threaten justice, he told his superiors. It threatens national security by creating vulnerable points in our institutions. The town's transformation attracted delegations from other communities facing similar challenges. May found herself hosting officials eager to understand how one person's stand could catalyze systemic change. Start with the truth, she advised them. No matter how uncomfortable, no matter who it implicates, truth is the foundation everything else builds upon. National media coverage focused on the broader implications. How many other communities suffered under similar corruption? How many other citizens had the courage to stand, but lacked the knowledge or support to act? May Richards didn't just expose corruption, a prominent editorial declared. She provided a blueprint for fighting it. Age, gender, status. None of these matter as much as the courage to stand for what's right. The recognition brought resources. Grants funded expansion of community programs. Federal agencies established regional training centers based on May's methods. Her example inspired similar initiatives across the country. Your grandmother's changing how we think about community justice, Chen told Jessica during a planning meeting. It's not just about law enforcement anymore. It's about building resilient communities that can resist corruption. May accepted the attention with reluctance, but understanding. Every interview, every ceremony, every recognition helped spread the message. Corruption thrived in silence and isolation, but determined communities could overcome it. The awards are nice, she told a reporter, but the real recognition I care about is seeing people stand up for their communities, seeing them realize they have the power to change things. As the documentaries aired and articles circulated, more communities reached out for guidance. May's phone rang constantly with requests for advice, support, and inspiration from others fighting similar battles. We don't need more awards, she insisted during one ceremony. We need more people willing to take a stand, more communities ready to work together, more citizens who understand that justice requires vigilance. The recognition served its purpose, not to celebrate one person, but to show others what was possible. May's story became a catalyst, inspiring action in communities that had long accepted corruption as unchangeable. The greatest recognition, she told her students, isn't a plaque or a ceremony. It's seeing people stand up for what's right, knowing they're not alone in the fight. May reviewed her travel schedule with Jessica, the speaking tour stretching across multiple states. Communities facing similar corruption had requested her guidance, turning her local victory into a national movement. 3 anti-corruption workshops next week, Jessica noted, checking the calendar, plus meetings with 2 federal task forces and a community organizers conference. Sure you're up for this? Had longer deployments with less sleep, May replied, packing her briefcase with training materials. These communities need more than just inspiration. They need practical strategies. Her approach combined military precision with community organizing. Each visit followed a proven pattern: assess local corruption, identify key allies, establish secure communication networks, and build community resistance. Indianapolis called again, David reported, managing security for her travels. They're dealing with similar police corruption. Want to know how we coordinated federal intervention without compromising local informants? The law firm Jessica established had grown into a network of civil rights attorneys specializing in corruption cases. The Richards Protocol became shorthand for their systematic approach to exposing and dismantling corrupt systems. We've got 15 active cases across 7 states, Jessica told her team, each one using Mum's methods, building community support, gathering solid evidence, coordinating with federal agencies. May's workshops evolved beyond basic self-defense. She taught community leaders how to recognize signs of systematic corruption, document evidence properly, and build networks strong enough to resist intimidation. Corruption isn't just about money, she explained during a session in Chicago. It's about power and fear. Break that fear, build community strength, and corruption loses its grip. Chen regularly joined these sessions, sharing law enforcement perspective. Reform isn't just about removing corrupt officers, she told attendees. It's about changing department culture, establishing real oversight, earning community trust. The movement grew organically. Communities that succeeded using May's methods helped others facing similar challenges. A network of mutual support emerged, sharing resources, strategies, and determination. Your grandmother's created something bigger than herself, Rodriguez observed during a security briefing. These communities aren't just fighting corruption. They're building resistance against it happening again. May found herself increasingly consulting with federal agencies. Her experience bridging military tactics and community organizing offered unique insights into fighting systematic corruption. Traditional law enforcement thinks in terms of individual crimes, she explained to an FBI task force. But corruption is more like an insurgency. It requires long-term strategy and community support to combat effectively. The travel took its toll, but May refused to slow down. Each community she visited reminded her of her own town's struggle, their determination reflecting the same courage she'd seen in her neighbors. "Got another case you should look at," Chen called one evening. "Small town in Michigan. Police chief there sounds exactly like Warren did. Same patterns, same protection racket." Jessica worried about her grandmother's pace but understood the urgency. "Every community we help weakens corruption's grip somewhere else. It's like dominoes falling. Each success inspires more resistance." May's methods spread through official and unofficial channels. Police academies incorporated her insights into ethics training. Community organizations adapted her strategies for local conditions. Government agencies studied her approach to community-based anti-corruption efforts. "It's not just about fighting corruption anymore," she told a graduate seminar on criminal justice. "It's about strengthening communities to prevent it from taking root in the first place." David's security firm specialized in supporting communities implementing the Richards Protocol. "We're not just providing protection," he explained to clients. "We're teaching communities to protect themselves." The Old Town saw changes too. The interim mayor, a former community organizer, implemented reforms that made corruption harder to hide. Regular audits, public oversight, and transparent governance became standard practice. "Your work here laid the foundation," Chen told May between trips. "Now we're building something that can last." May watched her influence spread with mixed emotions. The recognition mattered less than the results. Communities standing up, corruption exposed, justice served, but the personal cost was real. "Sometimes I miss my quiet mornings at the diner," she admitted to Jessica, "but then I remember why we started this fight. How many other communities need what we learned here?" The movement she'd sparked continued growing. Each community that stood up against corruption became a beacon for others, creating a network of resistance stronger than any individual effort. "We're not just moving on," she told her last local class before starting another tour. "We're moving forward, and we're bringing everyone with us who's ready to stand for justice." The Richards Foundation opened its doors in a renovated section of the old mill, transforming a symbol of corruption into a center for community empowerment. May stood at the podium during the dedication ceremony, surrounded by veterans, activists, and community leaders from across the country. "This foundation isn't about buildings or programs," she announced. "It's about giving communities the tools they need to stand against corruption and injustice." The foundation's mission combined May's military experience with her recent success in community organizing. One wing focused on supporting veterans transitioning to community service. Another provided resources for underprivileged youth interested in law enforcement or civil rights work. "We're creating the next generation of defenders," May explained to potential donors, "not just with weapons or badges, but with knowledge, integrity, and community support." Jessica managed the foundation's legal division, coordinating with law schools to establish scholarships for students committed to civil rights and anti-corruption work. The Richards Fellows Program placed young lawyers in communities fighting systematic corruption. "Mum's methods work," Jessica told a conference of legal educators, "but they need to be taught, refined, and adapted for different communities. That's what we're building here." The Community Park project emerged from local initiative. Residents wanted to honor May's contribution while creating a space that embodied her principles of community strength and unity. Richards Park will include training areas, community meeting spaces, and educational exhibits, the planning committee announced. A living monument to the power of standing together against corruption. May focused on mentoring, working with young activists and community organizers. Her students came from diverse backgrounds, but shared her determination to fight corruption and build stronger communities. "The most important lesson isn't about tactics or strategy," she told them. "It's about understanding that real change happens when communities decide to stand together." The Foundation's youth programs particularly energized May. She saw in young faces the same determination she'd recognized in her SEAL trainees years ago, the will to fight for something bigger than themselves. "You don't need special training or authority to make a difference," she explained to a group of high school students. "You need courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand up when others look away." David managed the Foundation's security consulting division, helping communities implement protective measures without creating fortress mentalities. Security isn't just about keeping bad things out, he taught. It's about building trust and cooperation within. The Foundation's influence spread through established and informal channels. Law enforcement agencies sent officers for training in community engagement. Community organizations learned strategies for effective oversight. Government agencies studied their methods for building public trust. May's legacy isn't just about fighting corruption, Chen observed during a Foundation board meeting. It's about changing how communities think about power and responsibility. The park's dedication drew thousands. People whose lives May had touched, directly or indirectly, gathered to celebrate not just her work but the movement she'd inspired. "Look around," she told the crowd. "Every person here represents a community standing stronger, a system more resistant to corruption, a future more secure for the next generation." Rodriguez's team helped establish training protocols for the Foundation's security programs. "We're adapting military precision and teamwork for civilian needs," he explained, teaching communities to protect themselves while staying connected. May spent more time mentoring than speaking now. Her experience proved valuable for young leaders facing similar challenges in their communities. "Your generation has advantages we never had," she told them. "Technology, connectivity, instant communication, but the core principles haven't changed. Truth, integrity, and community strength still matter most." The Foundation became a hub for anti-corruption efforts nationwide. Communities facing systematic corruption found resources, support, and proven strategies for resistance and reform. "This isn't about creating dependence on outside help," May insisted. "It's about empowering communities to solve their own problems, stand on their own strength." Her legacy took shape in unexpected ways. Police academies incorporated her methods into their training. Law schools studied her cases. Community organizations adapted her strategies for local conditions. "The real measure of our success," she told her staff, "isn't how many communities we help, it's how many learn to help themselves." Reports of gang activity in Cedar Grove, the neighboring town, landed on May's desk early one morning. The pattern was familiar. Protection rackets, compromised officials, systematic intimidation. Burke's old network hadn't died, it had merely shifted location. "They're adapting," Jessica observed, reviewing police reports. "Using smaller cells, better digital security, deeper cover for their operations, learning from their failures here." May studied the intelligence Chen had gathered. The new operation showed sophistication, no direct threats, no obvious violence, just quiet pressure and subtle corruption spreading through local institutions. "They think because they're being smarter, they're being invisible," May noted. "But corruption always leaves traces for those who know where to look." The Richards Foundation's monitoring systems had detected the pattern. Small businesses suddenly changing owners, local officials making unexpected policy reversals, police response times varying based on neighborhood demographics. "It's Burke's playbook," David reported, "but with better operational security. They're compartmentalizing information, using cutouts for communications, maintaining plausible deniability." Jessica's legal team had already started working with Cedar Grove residents. "We're seeing the same fear we dealt with here, but people are more willing to come forward. They've seen what happened in our town. They know change is possible." May recognized the challenge ahead. This wasn't just about stopping one operation. It was about preventing corruption from simply shifting to new territory. "They're counting on us fighting the last war," she told her team, "expecting us to look for the same tactics, the same vulnerabilities. We need to adapt faster than they do." The Foundation mobilized its resources. Training programs updated to address new threats, legal strategies refined to combat more sophisticated corruption, community organizing methods evolved to build stronger networks. "The next generation of corrupt officials won't be as obvious as Burke's people," Chen warned during a strategy session. "They'll hide behind legitimate credentials, sophisticated legal frameworks, complex financial structures." May's experience told her this was just the beginning. As communities became better at fighting traditional corruption, those seeking to exploit them would develop new methods. "We're not just fighting criminals anymore," she explained to her advanced students. "We're fighting systems designed to make corruption look legitimate. The challenge isn't just exposing wrongdoing, it's helping people recognize it in the first place." Jessica took point on the Cedar Grove situation, applying lessons learned from previous cases. "We start with education," she decided. "Help people understand what they're seeing, Build awareness before we build resistance. The Foundation's resources proved crucial. Data analysis identified patterns of corruption that might have gone unnoticed. Training programs prepared community leaders for the fight ahead. Legal teams stood ready to support resistance efforts. They think they're smarter than Burke, May observed, watching Cedar Grove's corruption patterns emerge. But they're making the same fundamental mistake, underestimating community power. David's security teams detected increased surveillance of Foundation activities. They're studying us, he reported, learning our methods, probing for weaknesses. This isn't just about Cedar Grove. They're testing our responses. May recognized the tactical situation. The enemy was evolving, adapting to new conditions, but so were the communities fighting them. Every challenge they present teaches us something new, she told her staff. Every adaptation they make shows us where we need to improve. The key is staying ahead of their learning curve. The Foundation's approach evolved accordingly. New training modules addressed digital security. Legal teams studied emerging forms of corporate corruption. Community organizers learned to recognize sophisticated intimidation tactics. The future of corruption isn't in obvious threats, May warned a group of community leaders. It's in making wrong seem right, in making exploitation look like opportunity. Our challenge is keeping communities alert to these subtler dangers. Jessica's work in Cedar Grove began showing results. Community resistance grew stronger. Local officials found their corruption harder to hide. The sophisticated operation began showing cracks under pressure. They thought they could outlast us, Chen noted during an update briefing. Didn't realize we're building something designed for the long haul. May watched developments with tactical awareness. This wasn't just another battle, it was a glimpse of future challenges. The war against corruption would keep evolving, requiring constant adaptation and vigilance. Our legacy isn't just in what we've built, she told her team. It's in how well we prepare the next generation to face challenges we haven't even imagined yet. The Riverside Diner hadn't changed much in the years since Burke's gang first confronted May. Sarah had updated the decor, added security cameras, and expanded the menu, but the corner booth where it all started remained the same. May sat there now, drinking her usual coffee, black with 1 sugar. The morning sunlight streamed through windows that had witnessed both corruption's threat and community's triumph. Can't believe it's been 5 years, Sarah said, refilling May's cup. Sometimes it feels like yesterday when those guys tried to intimidate you. They made the mistake of thinking age meant weakness, May replied. Lot of people learning better these days. The diner had become more than just a restaurant. Community leaders met here regularly. The bulletin board displayed information about Foundation programs. Even the placemats featured tips about recognizing and reporting corruption. A young girl approached May's table, maybe 12 years old, clutching a notebook. Ms. Richards, I'm doing a school project on community heroes. Would you teach me that self-defense move, the one from the video? May smiled, recognizing the spark of determination she'd seen in so many faces over the years. Pull up a chair. Self-defense starts with awareness, understanding your surroundings, knowing your strength. The lesson expanded beyond physical techniques. May found herself sharing wisdom earned through decades of service, military, community, and the battles between. Remember, she told the girl, the strongest defense isn't in your fists. It's in knowing you're not alone, that your community stands with you. Jessica arrived for their weekly breakfast meeting, carrying files on Cedar Grove's progress. The corruption there was failing, community resistance growing stronger. Another victory for the methods they'd developed. Got 3 new applications for the Richards Fellowship, Jessica reported. Young lawyers wanting to specialize in anti-corruption work. Your story keeps inspiring people. Through the window, May watched the town she'd helped transform. The park across the street, once a haven for Burke's dealers, now hosted community events. The police station flew a new flag promoting transparency and service. Sometimes I wonder, May mused, what would have happened if they'd picked a different target that day? Someone who couldn't fight back. That's why we do this work, Jessica replied. So nobody has to face corruption alone anymore. Chen stopped by, now running for state office on an anti-corruption platform. Remember when this booth was the scariest spot in town? She asked. Now it's where people come to learn about fighting corruption. The diner filled with morning regulars, small business owners, community organizers, students from the Foundation's programs. Each represented a thread in the network of resistance May had helped build. Got another training session this afternoon, May told them. teaching that new group from Cedar Grove. They're quick learners, already implementing advanced surveillance detection. The young girl practiced the defensive stance May had shown her, movement precise and confident. My mom says before you stood up to those guys, people were afraid to speak up. Now everybody knows they can make a difference. May watched her practice, seeing the future in her determined expression. That's the real victory, she told Jessica. Not just stopping corruption, but showing others they have the power to fight it. Sarah brought over fresh coffee, now serving it in mugs bearing the Foundation's logo. Full circle, she said, gesturing at May's booth. From one person standing up to a whole movement. Through the window, May could see the mill, now the Foundation's headquarters. Its transformation from corruption's fortress to community's resource center symbolized everything they'd achieved. We've got that meeting with federal task force leaders next week, Jessica reminded her. They want to implement your methods nationally. Tell them what I always say, May replied. Methods aren't magic. They work because communities make them work, because people decide to stand together. The morning sun climbed higher, another day of work ahead. May finished her coffee, ready for the next challenge, the next community needing support, the next battle against corruption. You know what Burke never understood, she told the young girl as they finished the lesson. Real strength isn't in causing fear, it's in helping others overcome it. The diner door chimed as May stood to leave. She paused, looking back at the booth where her stand against corruption began. One moment of refusing to back down had sparked a movement that continued growing, evolving, strengthening. Ready for today's battles? Jessica asked, gathering her files. May smiled, thinking of all the communities still fighting, all the people learning to stand together, all the future challenges waiting to be met. Always ready, she replied, because that's what we do. We stand up, we fight back, and we show others they can too. That's how change happens, one person, one community, one victory at a time.